Picture this, right? You're on a video call, you're looking at a colleague on your screen, and for the last, I don't know, 20 minutes, they've been the absolute picture of active listening.
Oh, I know exactly where this is going.
Right. They're nodding at a steady rhythm, they're smiling at all the right intervals, like they look incredibly present. And then the person running the meeting asks them a direct, highly specific question.
And then just dead silence.
Exactly. 1 second, 2 seconds, 4 agonizing seconds pass before you hear this tight, controlled panic in their voices. They say, sorry, could you repeat that? Because the truth is, they were on mute, they completely zoned out 10 minutes ago, and they were essentially just nodding at a wall.
Yeah, it's the universal modern nightmare, the illusion of presence, just completely shattered in an instant.
And you have probably been there. I mean, the real question we always ask ourselves in that split second is whether anyone actually noticed the lag.
Oh, people absolutely do notice the lag, even if they're, too professional to mention it right then. The hesitation itself communicates volumes about your level of engagement.
Well, that is the core of our deep dive today. We're looking at a specific source to help navigate this, a really fascinating script from episode 4 of a show called Sharp English, featuring hosts Marcus and Zara.
Which is packed with practical stuff.
It really is. And the mission today for you listening is to explore how to stay professional and credible on camera, even when your cognitive battery is, like, flashing red.
Because it happens to everyone.
Right. We're going to look at highly specific, structurally sound phrases that basically do the heavy lifting for you when your brain is just tapped out. We're focusing specifically on phrases like, let's make good use of the time, walk me back through, and who's doing what by when.
And to appreciate why these specific phrases are so necessary, we really have to look at the physical environment our source lays out.
Set the stage for us.
So imagine you're trying to project authority, right? But you're confined to a 12-inch screen. To the people looking at you, you're reduced to this 2-centimeter thumbnail.
It's absurd when you put it like that.
It is. And from that tiny digital box, you're trying to convince a stakeholder sitting in an office in Frankfurt that you are a competent, credible professional. You're dealing with, different time zones, varied accents, slight connection delays.
Yeah, the deck is stacked against you.
Exactly. In that environment, your language just has to work much harder to establish the baseline level of credibility you'd naturally have if you were simply sitting across a table from them.
Okay, but before we get into the actual linguistic tools, I feel like we need to address the exhaustion itself.
Oh, definitely.
Because I want to understand the mechanics of why we are so drained on these calls. If we don't understand the physical mechanism of the fatigue, we're just going to try to, push through it with caffeine, which never actually works.
No, it just makes you jittery and tired.
Right. The source cites some specific Stanford University research on cognitive exhaustion during video calls. So, walk me through the actual biology here. What is happening in my brain when I'm staring at that grid of faces?
So, the Stanford data is super revealing because it proves this isn't just a matter of poor attention span. It's an actual physiological stress response tied to 3 distinct mechanical pillars of the digital interface.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first is what researchers call hypergaze. So, think about a physical conference room. Nobody stares at you constantly.
Yeah, people look at their notes, they look out the window, maybe they check their phone.
Exactly. The visual attention is dispersed, but on a video call, everyone is looking straight ahead at their screens, which means your brain perceives that a grid of human faces is staring directly at you continuously for an hour.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and in nature, a prolonged direct gaze from multiple faces is a biological signal for either a mating situation or a high-level physical threat. Your brain is operating in a state of hyperarousal, constantly suppressing the subtle fight-or-flight response.
Okay, so just the visual architecture of the grid is triggering a mild, continuous threat response that actually completely explains the background hum of anxiety. But what about the actual communication part?
Well, that brings us to the second pillar, the cognitive load of processing missing signals.
Missing signals.
Yeah. When you're in a room with someone, your brain naturally picks up on 1,000 nonverbal cues, right? Microexpressions, subtle shifts in posture, even the cadence of their breathing. On a video call, those cues are either compressed into low-resolution pixels or they're just cropped out entirely by the framing of a webcam.
Because you only see them from the shoulders up.
Exactly. And your brain is a prediction machine. When it doesn't get the inputs it expects, it works in overdrive to fill in the blanks.
I've always thought of it kind of like driving in heavy fog.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Right. Because you aren't physically exerting more energy than you would on a sunny day. You're still just sitting in a seat, turning a steering wheel.
Mhm.
But your brain is straining. You're squinting, looking for taillights, searching for any missing signals ahead of you.
Right, right.
And when you finally park the car, you are completely wiped out just from the cognitive strain of interpreting obscured information.
That analogy perfectly captures the mechanical strain.
Yeah.
And there's a third factor compounding all of this, which is audio latency.
The delay.
Yeah. In natural conversation, the gap between people speaking is incredibly short. On a video call, there's always a micro delay. When someone takes an extra, say, 200 milliseconds to respond to a question on video, the brain's subconscious processing often misinterprets that lag.
Wait, how does it misinterpret it?
It doesn't read it as a technological glitch. It reads it as interpersonal resistance. It feels like the person is hesitating or maybe withholding information or even displaying hostility. You're spending immense cognitive energy just telling your own subconscious, no, it's just the internet connection.
That is wild. The narrative in the Sharp English script highlights a great example of how this plays out in real time.
Oh, the performance review story.
Yeah. Zara mentions having a performance review scheduled for 4 o'clock in the afternoon, right after a day of back-to-back calls. She noted that during the first 10 minutes, she could hear in her own voice that she sounded completely flat.
Which happens to the best of us by 4 p.m.
Totally. Not necessarily unhappy, but devoid of dynamic energy. And her manager noticed immediately, pointing out that she seemed unusually quiet.
See, on camera, your face isn't just part of the room, your face is the whole room. Every slight hesitation or flattening of your tone is hyper visible. By the time someone actually mentions your fatigue, the narrative in their head has already shifted from this person is sharp to this person is checked out.
That's terrifying.
It is. And because the fatigue is a biological reality of the medium, we can't just tell ourselves to focus harder. We need a linguistic system to construct a presence that holds up even when our energy dips.
So let's build that system. Let's move chronologically through a typical call to see how we can use specific language to manage this cognitive load, starting with the very first minute. Because the opening seems to be where most people set themselves up for failure.
Absolutely. The beginning of the call sets the subconscious hierarchy and tone for the entire interaction. Most people open really passively.
Like saying, "Can everyone hear me okay?"
Exactly. That is the absolute default phrase, and on the surface, that's just a practical technical check.
Yeah.
But linguistically, it puts the speaker in an interrogative, waiting position. You are essentially asking the room for permission to begin.
Okay, so the alternative Marcus and Zara suggest is opening with a declarative statement. Something like, "Good to have everyone here. Let's make good use of the time."
Yes.
But wait, if I'm just a junior analyst on the call and I drop, "Let's make good use of the time," aren't I going to sound incredibly arrogant, like I'm trying to boss my manager or my client around?
It's a really valid concern, but it comes down to the subtle difference between managing other people and managing your own intent. You aren't giving an order. The phrase, "let's make good use of the time," just signals that you respect the collective bandwidth of the room.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, it shifts you from a passive participant waiting to be called upon to a professional who is actively invested in the outcome of the meeting. It establishes a baseline of competence. The listener subconsciously processes that this person came prepared.
Okay, so we've established that strong opening.
Yeah.
But invariably, about 3 minutes in, disaster strikes, a technical glitch.
The dreaded screen share freeze.
Yes. Your screen share freezes or you accidentally close out of the presentation deck. My instinct, and I suspect this is true for most people, is to immediately vocalize my panic so people know I'm trying to fix it.
Oh, the apology spiral.
Right. I start saying, "Oh gosh, hold on. I'm so sorry. Bear with me. My computer's acting up."
Yeah.
Isn't it important to apologize so they know I respect their time?
We have a reflex to apologize because we want to demonstrate empathy. But we have to look at what an apology actually communicates in a professional setting. When you rapidly repeat, "sorry, sorry," you are signaling a loss of control. You're basically transferring your own anxiety onto the rest of the room.
That makes sense. It just makes everyone tense.
Exactly. The people watching don't feel respected, they feel uneasy, because the person driving the presentation is completely flustered. The strategy the Sharp English script provides is a pivot to methodical control.
So what do you say instead?
Instead of the apology spiral, you use a calm, declarative boundary. You say, "bear with me one moment. I want to make sure the connection is working properly before we continue."
Oh, that's good. That reframes the entire delay.
Yeah.
You aren't fumbling with a broken computer. You are deliberately pausing the meeting to ensure quality control.
Precisely. The mechanical reality hasn't changed at all. The screen share is still broken, and you are still trying to fix it. But the perception of you has completely transformed. You sound like a technician, calmly diagnosing a system. By refusing to panic, you maintain authority and effectively calm the room.
So we manage the opening and the glitch. But the real danger zone of any video call is the middle. You're 30 minutes in.
Yep, the heavy fog has rolled in.
Exactly. You've been quiet for 10 solid minutes while other people debate a point, and you realize you need to visibly get back into the flow before you completely disappear from the group's awareness.
And the source offers a structural reentry phrase for exactly this moment. When you need to visibly step back into the conversation, you don't wait for a direct question. You say, I want to pick up on something that was mentioned earlier, and then you reference a specific data point or comment from earlier in the call.
I see how that functions mechanically. It proves you were actually listening while you were silent.
Right.
It frames your previous 10 minutes of silence, not as inattention, but as thoughtful observation. You were simply waiting to synthesize the information.
It allows you to dictate the terms of your reentry. Now, what happens when you genuinely miss something crucial?
Oh, this is the worst.
Marcus highlighted a scenario on a vendor review call with 6 people spread across 3 time zones. Someone is making a critical point, and the audio drops for 10 seconds. Half the sentence is just lost to latency.
The default reaction is to say, sorry, I missed that, which, given what we discussed about the brain's threat response and latency, probably signals to the other person that you just weren't paying attention.
Exactly. But the senior person on Marcus's call used a completely different approach. She said, I want to make sure I'm capturing this correctly. Can you walk me back through that last point?
Wow. Walk me back through that last point.
Yeah. This is a masterclass in shifting perception. It moves the interruption away from a technical failure or a lapse in focus and reframes it as an act of extreme diligence. You are signaling that their point is so important, you want to ensure total accuracy.
That's brilliant.
But structurally, there's a reason this specific phrasing works better than just asking someone to repeat themselves.
I notice a psychological shift in asking someone to walk you back through something. You aren't just buying time to catch up, are you?
No, you are asking for the logic of their point. When you say, can you repeat that? You're treating the other person like a tape recorder. It forces them to try and remember the exact words they just used, which is super frustrating.
Right, nobody likes repeating themselves word for word.
But when you ask them to walk me back through, you are giving them the runway to reprocess their own thought. Often they will explain it much more clearly and concisely the second time around, which benefits everyone on the call.
It respects their expertise while solving your own comprehension problem.
Okay, so as we move from the middle of the meeting to the final 10 minutes, we hit the stage where the actual value of the call is determined.
The wrap-up.
Yeah, this is where we have to close the loop and where we face some serious communication landmines. Let's look at how people check for alignment. I hear this on almost every call. Someone explains a complex, multi-stage plan and then ends with, does that make sense?
Oh, this is a fundamentally flawed way to check for understanding, especially in a digital space.
Sure.
Consider the psychological safety of the group dynamics.
Yeah.
When you ask, does that make sense? To a grid of 8 people, you are forcing a binary choice in a highly visible environment.
Because nobody wants to be the one person on a 12-inch screen, surrounded by peers and supervisors, raising their hand to say, no, I actually have no idea what you're talking about.
Exactly. The social friction of admitting confusion in that environment is just way too high. So what happens? Everyone just nods. You achieve false alignment. And then people agree to things they don't understand, which inevitably leads to operational mistakes the following week.
Precisely. The structural fix for this is subtle. Instead of challenging their comprehension by asking if it makes sense, you shift the focus to the forward momentum of the project. You state, let me check we're aligned on the next steps.
Ah. And there's an important detail Zara catches in the sharp English script regarding that exact phrase. She originally suggests saying, let me just check we're aligned, and Marcus immediately stops her and tells her to drop the word just.
Such a good catch. Just is a linguistic minimizer. It's an apologetic modifier that suggests you're sorry for taking up space or slowing down the meeting. Let me check we're aligned. Completely removes the emotion. It focuses purely on operational clarity.
Which perfectly sets up the final closing of the meeting. The way most people end a call is by throwing out a vague promise like, all right, I'll follow up on that.
Which is awful.
Right. When you look at the mechanics of I'll follow up, it's effectively creating a deferred responsibility loop. You haven't assigned an actor, and you haven't assigned a deadline. You've just thrown the task into a holding pattern, which almost guarantees another meeting will be required to figure out who is actually doing the work.
It creates the illusion of momentum without any of the actual friction of decision-making.
Hmm.
The power closer the source recommends is highly specific. You say, before we close, I want to confirm who's doing what by when.
It is entirely unambiguous.
Yeah, it acts as a mechanism for accountability. It forces the abstract conversation into a concrete action plan before anyone is allowed to log off. It signals to stakeholders that you are invested in actual outcomes. And you wrap that up with a humble summary check.
What's the summary check?
You say, let me make sure I've understood the key outcome. By framing the summary as a check on your own understanding, you avoid sounding like a dictator assigning homework. You invite correction while still maintaining total control over the final narrative of the meeting.
It organizes the chaos. Now, before we conclude, the sharp English script explicitly warns against two massive behavioral landmines that completely destroy credibility on video calls.
These are so important.
The first one takes us right back to our nodding colleague at the beginning of this deep dive. The mute excuse. When someone asks you a question and you realize you have been talking to yourself on mute for 20 seconds, the instinct is to feign technical ignorance and say, I think I was on mute.
Including the phrase, I think, is what destroys the credibility in that moment. The interface literally highlights a red microphone icon.
Yeah.
Everyone on the call knows you were on mute. When you say, I think, it suggests you are entirely disconnected from the reality of the software you're using. It sounds uncertain, and more importantly, it sounds like an evasion.
You sound like you're trying to hide the fact that you weren't paying attention. The mechanical fix is to drop the uncertainty and just own the physical reality of the platform. You say, apologies, I was on mute. Let me come back to that. You state the fact, and you immediately pivot back to the substance of the question.
It demonstrates resilience. You acknowledge a minor error without letting it derail your composure.
And the second landmine.
The second landmine is perhaps even more damaging to the collaborative energy of a room, the clock check.
Oh, I hate this one.
We have all seen this. A discussion is happening, and suddenly someone dramatically looks down at their watch or visibly checks the time in the corner of their monitor and interrupts with, well, I have another call at 3:30.
It is the professional equivalent of checking your watch while someone is pouring their heart out on a date. It instantly kills the momentum. You are visually and verbally dismissing the people in front of you.
Absolutely.
But I struggle with this one because the reality of corporate scheduling is that you often do have another call. You cannot simply miss your next meeting out of politeness. How do you manage a hard boundary without insulting the room?
The solution relies on proactive framing rather than reactive interruption. You have to establish the boundary before the cognitive fog sets in.
So early on.
Exactly. In the very first minute of the call, as part of your opening, you say, I have a hard stop at 3:30, so I want to make sure we get to the key decisions first.
Oh, I see how that changes the dynamic. By establishing the boundary early, it becomes part of the meeting's structural architecture.
Exactly. It frames your early departure not as a sudden loss of interest, but as an operational constraint that everyone needs to work within. It actually incentivizes the rest of the room to keep the conversation focused and efficient. When 3.30 rolls around and you politely excuse yourself, no one feels slighted because the expectation was negotiated and agreed upon from the start.
When we look at this entire sequence of phrases, from the declarative opening to methodical glitch management to demanding alignment on who's doing what, by when it becomes clear that this is not just about memorizing corporate jargon.
Not at all.
As Zara noted in the source, utilizing an active structured phrase actually forces your own brain to re-engage. You cannot be completely zoned out when you are deliberately managing the architecture of the conversation. The language acts as an anchor for your own attention, pulling you out of that cognitive fog.
The structure literally protects you from your own fatigue.
Yes, and we're going to pass the challenge from the Sharp English hosts directly to you, the listener. On your very next video call, even if it's just a routine internal catch-up with people you speak to every day, test the mechanics of this. Open the call with, good to have everyone here. Let's make good use of the time, instead of checking to see if people can hear your microphone.
And close the meeting with, before we close, I want to confirm who's doing what by when.
Use those two specific bookends. Say them out loud and observe how the dynamic of the virtual room shifts around you.
Which leaves you with one final structural implication to consider. We have spent this time analyzing the profound cognitive toll of a 2D digital interface. The hypergaze, the latency threat response, the heavy fog of missing signals. But video calls are just the current iteration of remote work. As companies begin transitioning towards spatial computing and virtual reality boardrooms, the sensory inputs are only going to become more complex and demanding.
Oh, wow. I hadn't even thought of that.
Yeah, if adopting intentional, structured language acts as necessary armor for your mental bandwidth on a flat screen today, what happens when we step into a fully immersive digital environment tomorrow? If we do not master the linguistic boundaries of a simple video call now, we might find ourselves entirely defenseless against the cognitive exhaustion of the virtual workspaces waiting just over the horizon.